Hello everyone, Mystical Arcane here, back again with Under the Veil, a Harry Potter Undertale crossover made by Populasia. Chapter 12, moving on up. Excuse me? Sans asked, understandably confused. Sirius, however, ignored the screaming house elf in favor of something else. He tensed as if bracing himself for something. The curtains they were standing near swept aside, and a gust of unfelt force and something began shouting obscenities. Though not curse words technically, just generally cruel and horrible, as loudly as possible. Or at least Sans hoped it was as loud as possible, because even without real ears, the noise was deafening. The shrieking reached a new crescendo of craze, proving Sans' hopes wrong. He couldn't see much of what was going on, since Sirius had begun struggling to close the curtains, and the curtains seemed to be fighting back. It didn't help that the large-eared creature had moved from shouting at Sans to actually flinging magic at him. The attacks were weak, battered aside with barely a thought, but they were distracting. There were maybe 3-4 seconds of unbridled, noisy chaos before the short skeleton chose to do something about it. With a surge of magic, Sans froze creature and aimed in the general direction of whatever had been behind the curtains. His magic whiffed through nothing but paint, canvas, and wood. Kind of. It felt weird, almost like feeling cloth snag on something unexpected. There wasn't a soul behind the curtains, but there was rather dense enchantment. Blue magic catching magic still seemed to have the desired effect, regardless that Sans hadn't been aiming to free spellwork. And an abrupt silence descended. Sirius, who honestly hadn't been faring well in his confrontation with the curtains, loosely let the heavy fabric fall as he curiously turned to his friend. Sans could see now that the horrible shrieking had, in fact, been coming from a painting. Proof positive, in a sense, that portraits could move and talk in this world. I'm surprised that worked. The painting in question was of an insane old woman. A really insane old woman. If that hadn't been made clear by the screaming, other than the crazy in her painted eyes, the first thing Sans noted was that she wore a black cap with a small veil covering up most of her filthy graying hair. In fact, her clothes looked like she had been painted immediately after her funeral, and the rest of her appearance made him wonder if perhaps the funeral in question had been her own. Her skin looked old, but more than that, it looked sickly, wrinkly and yellow, and basically the perfect example of what skin shouldn't look like. Even as a skeleton who had lived underground surrounded by monsters, he knew that sort of cuddling wasn't exactly healthy on a human. Though most of her painted self was kept immobile by Sans' blue magic, her eyes still darted back and forth furiously. For an instant after she spotted Sans in the skeletalness, something akin to shock, maybe even fear, flashed over her face, just quickly replaced by maniacal glare. However, as if doing so might see them both drop dead. Lovely woman, Sans remarked without a hint of sincerity. My mother, introduced Sirius. Walburga Black. The skeleton regarded the painting for another moment before shaking his head slowly. My condolences. He felt both the painting and the house elf tense indignantly at that, or at least that's what he imagined it was. He obviously wasn't well versed in how the portraits worked. They clearly had more to say. Shout, more like. But Sans wasn't keen about letting them deafen him again. I know, right? Sirius pulled the old curtain shut again, then turned to scowl at creature. Looks like he's even worse than before. He's a horrible little bastard, but he never attacked anyone in the order. Curious, and of course because he would need to eventually, Sans loosened his grip on the house elf. Mother! Filthy, disgusting! Glad that he hadn't loosened his grip on the painted lady behind the curtain, Sans quickly clamped back down with a grimace. I think he had a vendetta on me for some reason. If looks could kill, Creature's glare would have dusted Sans right where he stood. Sirius was staring at the house elf with clear disdain, but at the same time there was an edge of uncertainty. There had been plenty of time in the void to get over the crap from his youth. After a moment, he crouched in front of the short creature. Look, Sans isn't a murderer, so at the very least nobody have killed said stay dead. The ones that weren't actually dead, I mean, 'cause... Stop, the wizard said, pinching his bridge of his nose and shooting his skeletal flint, a look that promised he'd weasel the full story out of him eventually. You're not really helping me on this. Sans just shrugged in a what can you do gesture. Faced with such nonchalant apathy, Sirius could... okay. Sirius could do nothing but sigh and return his attention to the furious, in his opinion, still completely bonkers house elf. Creature? It might as well have been an insult. Creature. Creature! It might as well have been an insult, the way he said the name. I'll be honest here. I hate you and you hate me. But criminal record or no, I am the current Lord of the House of Black. Sans is my guest, and I won't stand for the insane attacks against him. Creature continued to glare, but something shifted in his eyes, a hint of unwilling acknowledgement and a whole lot of confusion. When Sans dropped his containment again, the elf stayed silent for a long moment, shaking with barely contained anger before viciously hissing,
The master wishes to protect one of Master Regulus's murderers.
Well, that's just patently false. He's clearly delusional. Sirius sighed, scrubbing a hand through his ear. More than before, if that's even possible. Creature's eyes lit up with rage and something deeper. There was an absolute conviction, drowning in sorrow, that rang through his entire expression. Sans knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror those rare times he couldn't push through his memories. The look of someone who had lost the whole world.
Creature knows what he saw. Creature still sees it.
In his dreams and his nightmares. Sans read from the house elf's face, and in his almost whispering voice that grew more desperate the more he said,
Master been dragged out, and Master has commanded Creature to go, so Creature must go. But Master is drowning because of those horrid, disgusting corpses.
Sans cut him off sharply, not with magic, with a single look. His eye sockets were empty pools of black, and when he spoke, his tone was indisputable. I did not kill him. He completely let go of the magic holding the house elf. Creature jerked as his balance was returned to his own control. One of his ears twitched. He took a step back, eyes never leaving the skeleton, but hidden in his boundless loathing was just the barest hint of consideration. Then there was a sound like a... and the house elf was gone. There wasn't really much else to see, really. It was interesting enough, to be sure. But it's a bit difficult to appreciate the cool bits when a lot of the other bits are actively, well, gnawing on your ankle. Sans was distracted from Sirius's house door around the house when he caught sight of a pair of small creatures with compound eyes, beetle-like wings, and twice as many limbs as expected, trying to do just that. Tiny jaws clicking uselessly against his lower leg bones. There are a lot of these things that have made themselves at home here once the place was abandoned, Sirius was saying, smacking away what appeared to be a swarm of living dust balls that puffed out of the carpet as he led the way into the drawing room. Most of them are fairly harmless, though, so should be fine till we get to the cleaning. Sans hummed distractedly, still curiously watching the little pest's attempts to bite him. Mind you, the furniture is probably loads more dangerous in comparison. Like that grandfather clock there. He abruptly cut himself off. Yeah, it would. Sans, you're being chewed on. The skeleton looked back down at the feet, finding that another one had joined in. He hadn't noticed. Yes, he agreed. That would seem to be the case, wouldn't it? Sirius looked torn between smacking himself, smacking his friend, or smacking the things currently gnawing on his friend. Something was going to be smacked, though, that's for sure. It was Sans. Of course, the skeleton ducked under his swing, even though there wasn't any real force behind it. With a huff, Sirius repeated, "You're being chewed on! Do something about it!" What are these things, anyways? Sans asked, kicking his leg out to temporarily scatter the three creatures. Duxies! They're annoying little biters! Sirius flicked out his wand and waved in a quick jagged motion. Flipendo! And that is where we will stop. Mystical Arcane out. Have a lovely time during quarantine. I'll do part 2 tomorrow.